Margot Jones. I'm the chair of the Greenfield Historic Commission, and I'd like the commissioners here to say their names and indicate that they're present.
There we go. Excuse me. Tim Blagg, and I'm here.
Matt Abbey, present. Is it not?
It wasn't on. It's green when it's on.
Oh, okay. Hello. Oh, there we go. Matt Abbey, present.
Jeremy Ebersole, present.
Sarah Bulldog, present.
Sarah, were you on?
Yes, it is. Yes, I am now. Nope. I do that.
You may be having reverb issues.
Yeah, Sarah, maybe turn the audio off on your laptop.
I'm
Yeah.
trying.
Okay.
Sarah Bulldog, present.
Right, and is Doug Mayo here anywhere? Apparently he's not yet present. Hopefully he'll be able to come. Okay, this is a public hearing. I'm going to read the notice that was published in the paper. Notice is hereby given that the Greenfield Historical Commission will hold a Zoom hybrid public hearing on Thursday, January 2nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. at the John Zahn Community Center located at 35 Pleasant Street on the application of the Community YMCA for the demolition of the Zion Church building located at 463 Main Street in Greenfield in order to use the open space to expand their playground area and open a third full preschool classroom. Then they gave the Zoom link. And we welcome you all. You certainly can move up closer. I hope all people who wish to make comments have signed in, because we'll go in the order of folks that signed in. And we also are on Zoom, so hello to the people out there. We can't see you, or I can't see you, but at any rate, if you wish to speak, please sign in on the chat area, and you'll be recognized as well. We are limiting comments to 3 minutes. Tim will indicate when people have gone over their limit. And we ask that you be polite and civil and, follow Robert's Rules of Order, which we will be doing as well. And I did want to explain what the purpose of the hearing is. There is a demolition delay bylaw that was passed in 2007 in our laws of the City of Greenfield. It's for structures of historical or architectural significance. And the purpose of this ordinance is to preserve and protect, through advance notice of their proposed demolition, significant buildings within the town of Greenfield, which constitute or reflect distinctive features of the architectural, cultural, political, economic, or social history of the town, to encourage owners of preferably preserved significant buildings to seek out persons who might be willing to purchase and to preserve, rehabilitate, or restore such buildings rather than demolish them, to alert residents of the town to impending demolitions of significant buildings, and by furthering these purposes to promote the public welfare, to preserve the resources of the town, and to make the town a more attractive and desirable place in which to live. To achieve these purposes, the Greenfield Historical Commission is empowered to advise the Greenfield Inspector of Buildings with respect to the issuance of permits involving demolition, and the issuance of demolition permits for significant buildings is regulated as provided in this ordinance. And as most of you know, it's our job tonight to determine whether the Zion Church, or it's also called Coldbrook Springs Baptist Church, is in fact historically or architecturally significant in the town. And if so, then we will designate it as a preferably preserved building, and that designation will delay any demolition permit for up to 6 months. So are there any questions about the bylaw before we proceed? It's a very clear bylaw. It is common to the state, many other communities, I think maybe most, I meant to get this number, but at least over 200 communities have this bylaw on their books. And many of them have longer demolition delays and more details as to what happens if you are designated preferably preserved. But without further ado, let's see, is there anything else to mention at the beginning here? Tim is our timekeeper, and Jeremy's going to designate who's signed up and who's next. And but we will start with a presentation by the YMCA, the owner of the Colebrook Baptist Church. Thank you, Grady. No. Grady.
Do you want us to turn that screen? Can everybody see that?
We start over. Good evening. My name is Grady Vigneault. I am the CEO of Franklin County's Y, our DBA, officially known as the Community YMCA of Greenfield, Mass. And thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it. I come tonight not to rehash information and data that I shared with you back in May of 2024, but to hopefully be able to share with you, in addition to those 16 months of research and due diligence, we've continued to do it over the ensuing 6 months, and we'll continue to do so moving forward. Now, having said that, I am going to regale you with one piece of old news. Why did we accept a donation of the church back in, I think we first came to us in January of 2022. Very, very simple, very specific, very strategic decision that we chose to accept a donation. Our goal is to become an increasingly better, more accountable anchor institution in this community as we move forward. An organization that people can lean on, can trust, can take advantage of. And we aspire to do that in our current location at 451 Main Street, right here in the town of Greenfield. And this property adjacent to us, 463 Main, where the Colebrook Baptist Church is located, gives us just that opportunity. We do not want to be, as I've had many people tell me, you've got to move out of town, you've got to get more space, et cetera, et cetera. We've chosen to stay where we are. We've chosen to invest in the property we have. And as we continue to grow, to have that available space adjacent to us gives us sustainability for the long term. It will be here, the Y will be on Main Street if we can use that property a lot longer than I'm going to be around, a lot longer than any of my board members are going to be around. So very strategic in the long run. Now, my first bit of new information, one of the organizations we've been in touch with is the Barre, Massachusetts Historical Society. And they have on their staff a researcher by the name of Lucy Allen, who is par excellence in my regard. I've met with them, and in fact, one of the Greenfield community members, commission members, met on a Zoom meeting with the folks from the committee, the Barre Society. And I've met with Kay Flick, the president, and Lucy Allen, the historian, on several occasions, by phone, by email. And at one of the meetings, I said, I'd like to learn more about the history of this church. What we hear about a lot of things. What is the actual history? What impact does it have where you're from, et cetera, et cetera? And she took that and ran with it. And using as a foundation the 1953 article in the Greenfield Recorder-Gazette that said the church was from the Quabbin Reservoir, it was moved so it wouldn't be flooded, and that it was a site of many abolitionist meetings and speeches over the course of the years prior to its movement. She used that as a starting point and then went and tried to get any type of citation that would corroborate that, any kind of additional information, using her significant research skills, using the significant opportunities that databases like Nexus and Lexis and obviously the internet provides. And her bottom line after several hours and days of research and an email that I actually shared with all of you was that she could find no citations that corroborated that article, which formed the basis of folks in Greenfield's belief in the significance of the church. Some facts that she discovered. The church was not relocated from the flooded Quabbin Reservoir. It has never been a part of the Quabbin region. A fact, the church has moved from Barre, Massachusetts, as part of the Ware River Diversion Project, a project that would allow the Ware River to be used to supply the Quabbin Reservoir in the event of a drought to make sure that there's enough water for the state. And in fact, the spot from where it was moved has never been flooded, and it's still there. As Lucia said, you can drive down the road and see where it was. A third fact, the church has significant historic relevance in the city of Barre in the fight for religious freedom back in the 1930s and 1940s. Massachusetts, as some of you may know, was one of the last states in the Union to actually separate church and state. But in the 40s, they had not done that, and townspeople found themselves being forced to pay taxes to whatever church was in their community and being forced to worship at that church. And so this was the Barre citizenry's response and protest against that, and saying we deserve the ability to decide how we want to worship. We deserve the ability to spend money and pay to a church that we want to support. So that is pretty significant in the history of Barre, Massachusetts. Here's a couple of pieces of information that now she brought up. It is highly unlikely that the William Lloyd Garrison or any other abolitionist ever spoke at the Goldbrook Baptist Church. Furthermore, it is highly unlikely that the church was ever part of the Mass Underground Railroad network. Now, she's not saying that it's absolute fact, but based on the research she's done, finding zero citations, zero corroboration, it is highly unlikely. Just as part of our due diligence, I want to just reinforce our purpose, our goal from the beginning is not to destroy the church, but to find a way to relocate it where the history is relevant. And to that effect, we've done a lot of outreach. We've had 8 responses, 3 local, for a variety of which none are interested. We've actually connected with 2 history museums, pretty popular and well-known ones, Old Sturbridge, who was very interested. The president got back to me right away. He said, the only problem we have is that we had put a moratorium on moving additional buildings onto our property back in 2022. And while we're interested, we're reluctant to really push forward on that. I think the translation is that they're trying to not spend as much money as they have in the past on moving properties. Historic Deerfield, the president and the director of historic preservation came up and actually toured with me through the church a couple of weeks ago. They were very interested. And a little piece of information, was a gentleman in Greenfield, actual architectural expert named Bill Glass, and some of the work that was done on the church after it was moved, not part of the original work, they were amazed, going, that's a Bill Glass door, that's a Bill Glass application. So there's some history there in Greenfield I thought was pretty interesting. But they declined any interest, again, claiming it was just too expensive, and I hate to throw numbers out, but they were talking $1.5 to $2.5 million for a relocation of the church. And then there were 3 historical commissions that we connected with. Right here locally, Pecumtuck Valley Memorial Association, very interested but declined. Insufficient land to relocate the church. The Swift River Valley Historical Society, which covers the Quabbin Reservoir area, and they were interested but declined. Basically, the church was never part of the Quabbin region. And then the aforementioned Barre Mass Historical Society, as you can imagine, based on the information we've developed and uncovered, they are very interested and engaged. They've been in touch with me on many occasions, and they are scheduled to come up and visit the church tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, so I'll be taking them on a tour. So let's assume that church is not going to move. Based on our strategic plan research, based on additional research that we did this past summer with our Director of Child Care and one of our key board members, Allison Berglund-Poggi, our assessment for that property is to use it for the community's #1 priority for us to address. Now, that doesn't mean the community's #1 priority. I think we would probably all agree that economic activity and energy and advancement would be #1, because that's the tide that raises all boats. We can work with the city on that, but we're not going to drive that on our own. But we can drive childcare. We can support childcare. In 2022, we reached 900 residents, either through in-person interviews or electronic survey responses. #1 unmet need for YMCA to address in their minds, childcare. Summer 2024, within a 10-mile radius, 46 licensed childcare options, capacity of just over 1,000 children ages 3 months to 13 years. In a similar geography, there's almost 7,000 children aged 14 and younger. Now, I'm not presuming that there's 6,000 children who have unmet needs. There's unlicensed programs, there's play groups, there's childcare in homes, there's grandparents, there's caregivers, there's sports, school sports and youth sports. But on a macro level, I think we can all agree that childcare is not being met in this community. On a micro level, right here at Franklin County's Y, we have an active, we are able to handle and serve 51 children up at our Northfield Mount Hermon Child Care Center that we operate. We're able to manage and host and enroll 34 children at our 2 rooms here on 451 Main Street at our existing YMCA. In addition, we have an active wait list of 50 that we've capped it at, and we get 10-plus phone calls a week. Help us with childcare, help us with preschool. And then a side note, I think this is important. Majority, 50% or more of our children who we serve depend on state of Massachusetts childcare vouchers or financial aid from our Y so that they can afford childcare. So let's assume that church is going to stay. Childcare is the only route we can even see any hint of a return on our investment. We brought in, back in April of 2024, I spoke to 2 contractors, one of which is Marion Schmidt, Bob Provost. Just recently, I went back to Bob and said, Bob, I need to dive deeper into what the numbers of this renovating this church would be. And so we need to get it to a safe, healthy, square box. Then we need to add all the needs that we would have to put in place for EEC, the Mass State Commission on Early Education and Childhood, so that they would license that so that we could host 20 children in that church, which is about as big a group of children that the EEC would allow us to do. However you want to look at it, either an inspiring number or an absolutely frightening number, to get to that point, safe and ready to be licensed, $1.5 million and a little bit of change. Now, Bob is here tonight, Bob Provost. If you have questions after this presentation, I'm taking a diving deeper into these numbers. He's here to answer those questions. He can do a much better job than I can, but we've sat and gone over this, and they're pretty spot on. Our conclusion, given our current operating model, is that there is no way that we can afford an extended annual operating deficit caused by absorbing a 15-year, 7% interest rate, $1.5 million mortgage. That results in $154,000 of annual debt service that we are going to consign ourselves to losing money, not just in childcare, but losing money as an organization, because it's not just childcare, but it's an overall YMCA organization for the next 15 years or so. It's a non-starter for us. And again, I can go into that deeper if you'd like, but just top line, there's no way we can do that. So in conclusion, and I want to reiterate, we've done what you've asked us to do. When I came to you in May of 2024, I'm not sure I followed the right protocols, but we did 16 months of research, and we really looked at what can we do with the church, would anybody take it? Here are the 10, 12 options we looked at for purposes of using it ourselves. None made sense except for a revenue-producing childcare program. Margot, you and I walked through it and looked at it as a teen center, and I was, in those early naive days, I was pretty excited about that. And I still am trying to find a way to find some place in this organization where we can support teen programming, but this church isn't it. I also want to highlight that I know very well what your charter is, and that is to preserve history in this community, and I appreciate that, and I shared that with you. I also know from a lot of the folks behind me, I got a charter as well. Make sure this YMCA is serving the needs of our community and is relevant and is sustainable for a lot longer than you're going to be here, Grady. Now, neither of us operate in a vacuum. I recognize that history is important, and that's why we've tried really hard to find a way to support somebody taking the church, moving it. And I would just ask very respectfully, I'll make the comment that a city organization should be able to step outside that charter and help identify ways for an organization that's important city. Whether it's a nonprofit YMCA, whether it's a bank, whatever organization it is that brings value to the community, let's work together to try to find a way to move forward so that we can achieve our mission, we can be sustainable, and we can still be very respectful of history. Having said that, our community of YMCA connections has spoken. Childcare is the number one need which Franklin County's YMCA should prioritize in the eyes of the folks that have responded to us. And in alignment with that priority, we request very respectfully that we are given permission to proceed with either relocating or otherwise removing the buildings from that property so that we can take the next step forward in building a model that supports, again, going back to our strategic planning and our more recent research, the number one need that we can personally, as an organization, go back to good to great. There's a need, we're good at it, we're passionate about it. All three intersect that middle section, which says more childcare in this community, and that's what we can do for this community. So please give us that opportunity to open up a playground on newly vacated space, open a third classroom, effectively driving up by 50% our ability to support community needs, and get us off the razor's edge with our current preschool playground, which I think many of you have seen, that is not very attractive and it's not very efficient for working with children, and also give us an opportunity to build an affordable splash pad that will not only benefit our children during hot months, but also when we're not using it, we are very committed to finding a way to open that splash pad. Would be, I think, the first of its kind in Greenfield, to community members. Not Y community members, but community members in Greenfield. Find a way for those families to take advantage of a nice, cool opportunity during a 90-degree August day or July day or September day. So, thank you very much.
Grady. We appreciate the presentation, and now we'll open it up for public comment. Before we do, I want to point out that it is our required job tonight to decide whether this building should be determined to be designated a significant structure, and if so, we'll have to impose the delay. Now, if it is listed or is within an area listed on the National Register of Historic Places, then it is by law considered significant. So I would hope that you would point your comments to this question, because that's what we're here to determine tonight. Okay, so who do we have first?
They're going to need that chair.
Yeah, do
Yeah.
you want me to stand up here or just?
You
go
can
back?
sit up here or go back there, whichever. We'd love it to have more people closer to us so we can see you better.
Okay, so I think we have 6 people signed up currently. And I think we talked about potentially taking some comments from the audience here in person first, and then seeing if there are folks online and kind of coming back and forth so that everyone has an opportunity. And of course, if we get through and there are others who want to speak, we can have the opportunity at the end as well. So I have the first name on the list is Randall Hansk. You can come up to the podium and state your name as you make your comments. Thank you.
I didn't choose this name. Hi, I'm Randy Hansis, and I live here in Greenfield. My family moved here in 1990. We're from out of town, so we don't share the heritage of living here. Fortunately for that, I had Peter, who was on the Historical Commission, and he was a great mentor for me. Let me present some credentials, because I have a perspective that's a little enhanced. I am a PhD in history, and I taught for 33 years at Mass College of Liberal Arts. My degrees are they're in American history from Claremont Graduate School in California, and from the University of New Mexico, where I studied comparative history of the Americas, and I specialized in Latin America. My credentials also include publishing. I have published with McGraw-Hill, so I am coming to you as a bona fide professional historian. And that becomes important because I have a perspective that's a little different from many people in this community who were raised with a romantic concept of history. Romanticism governed this nation and the schools of this nation in the 19th and early 20th century. And much of the history that we have commonly in this country is a romantic concept of history. There are many other concepts of history. I taught historiography, which is the philosophy of history. And if you go back to the Greeks, and you go back to the Romans, and you go back to church members of different faiths, there are many different kinds of historical interpretations. My credentials also include being on the Historical Commission for 6 years. I am not a person who is opposed to the relics of history and using those relics of history in today's world. I take great pride in being the individual more than anyone else. Bill Martin was a partner with me as we did this. We saved the bas-relief stonework from the Ford garage on West Main Street. Those would not be in the parking garage if it weren't for me. I saved those. I was also an advocate for the Russell Wiley Dam when it first came under attack. And I'll say attack because it is a historic relic. The things that I've mentioned, the bas-relief stonework in the town garage, those speak to the history of Greenfield. They are important, and they have been redone in a modern conceptualization that serves the purpose of people today. And that is why I am speaking on behalf of the YMCA in the demolition of this building. We are collecting historic relics. That's it.
You're short. That's it. Give you 30
Let's-
seconds or so, but please wind it up, Randy.
Okay. We are collecting historic relics, not buildings that facilitate the needs of the people today. We have the National Bank on Bank Row. We have the library across the street, kitty corner from the post office. These are empty buildings that are dead air in this community. And now this is another one. The church is another one that is dead air. It does not attract community activity. There's much that needs to be done in this community. There's much that needs to be done with the children, also all the other services that the YMCA provides. And that space could be used for activity, not for dead air, not for a black hole.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. The second person on the list, I have Sandy Thomas.
I've got it.
I love paperwork. Yes, I do.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Given the rich history, this church should be preserved and reutilized where it is established. It's an important contributing building to the East Main Street Historic District. We're fortunate to have an unusually compelling series of buildings at sites that work together on Main Street to tell the story of freedom from slavery, with Greenfield's vital role in this historic effort. To the right of the church is Billy Elliott's home, which was used on the Underground Railroad to help slaves escape to freedom. To its left were two sites of related activity. the Franklin County Anti-Slavery Society, and the home of George Davis, a key figure in Massachusetts abolitionist activities. This admirable history and others were painted on the sidewalk in our downtown art walk honoring Greenfield's anti-slavery legacy. The Colebrook Spring Church itself was built in a village in Barre, Massachusetts. It was deemed important enough to move here in 1936. To save it from demolition from the creation of the Quabbin Reservoir and the Ware River diversion, it was then rebuilt board by board on the original granite foundation. It's well documented that famed anti-slavery advocates William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass spoke in Barre in 1842 and 1845. It has been reported that Garrison spoke at this church. Professor Ann Matina of Stonehill College published a map of Frederick Douglass's Massachusetts presentations, and she told me, quote, typically, speakers of this reputation would speak at a site in the afternoon and then travel to another, often unpublished site in the evening. Oral history becomes very important, as we all know, and it's not always documented. This church, built in 1842, represents a time in American history prior to the Civil War, a time that was pivotal in moving the needle to end slavery. It's important for all of us to advocate on behalf of our historic spaces and districts which convey a specific history. Once they're gone, they're gone. Several public statements have been made about the church that would benefit from clarification. There are 3 buildings on this site: the church, the Highest Carriage House with a connector. It's important to distinguish which building has which issues and not lump them all together. The church appears to be in reasonable shape. The carriage house is the building with an attic, a wet basement, a crumbling foundation, and is filled with asbestos and mold, not the church. A few months ago, a representative from the YMCA said they did not purchase the church property, but rather accepted the donation of land as a strategic long-term decision. However, according to the deed in the assessor's card, the YMCA purchased the land and the buildings on it, and it wasn't a secret that the church was in a historic district. I don't believe the owner of any historic property should be able to demolish it because it might be inconvenient to steward it. However, it would be really great to work together to find a way to reutilize this building and preserve the historic exterior. Franklin County's YMCA could stand as a beacon of respect, caring, and responsibility, 3 of their core values, and other YMCAs across the country would also be able to seek ways to promote responsible leadership as they preserve their community's shared history. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sandy.
We'll do one more from the audience and then see if we have anyone on Zoom who had a comment wanted to speak as well. The next person I have on the list here is Gary Selden, it looks like. He had to go. Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry about that. We can move on then to Garth.
Shaneyfield.
Sure. Yes. Okay. I can't read my handwriting half the time.
Mine's a little sketchy. Hi, yes, I'm Garth Schoenefeld. I live over on Grinnell Street, right around the corner from the church. Yeah, it's been there for quite a while. I've only been here 20 years, but it has not been significantly used. Right, it was a Korean church for a while. It was another church for a little bit. It's been abandoned for a while. It's been up for sale. Like there was a big for lease or sale thing for quite a while there. I'm really excited about that area being reactivated as something useful for the whole community. As most churches will tell you, a building is not a church. It's the people and it's what happens there. I'm super excited about the Greenfield abolitionist historical tour that's been put in. I think that really adds to the community. But in terms of the church and the building itself, it really doesn't, like, my house is historical, right? It was built in 1883. That's great, and it has a bunch of vinyl siding, and it's been renovated 15 times, and it's got all sorts of problems, like as all of our houses do. You know, we have wet basements, right? It's Greenfield, so here we are. So I guess my point is just that we should look to, like, how can we serve the community and move forward and make those spaces activated for the people that are living here now, and that might want to come and continue to live here and to continue to add to this community. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Is there another?
We do have a few more here. Do we want to check in on Zoom
Yeah.
and see if there are folks who have
Aaron? do you-
requested to speak on Zoom?
If there is anybody on Zoom who wishes to make a public comment, please raise your hand on your device and we will get to you. As of now, there are no hands up.
Okay. We have two more then signed up here. I have Patty Perry.
I'm no relation to Counselor Perry, just a coincidence. A couple comments that I have, of course, the understanding that this building is in our historic district. It is considered a contributing property. Therefore, that is sort of the primary point here. You know, and listening to the WISE presentation is quite interesting, but the fact that a historian in Barrie spent several hours looking and doing some research on documenting things and came up with nothing doesn't mean that there is nothing to substantiate any of the other historic factors. But all of that aside, that is a building that is a contributing property in our historic district, and that historic district is part of the identity of Greenfield in many ways, and that church has been used for a long time by the Christian Science Church, then the Zion Church, and then it was put up for sale. I should add that when the Y accepted the gift of that property, they did it knowing that it was a historic property in a historic district. So, you know, if they want to do something different with it, I think that should be a major consideration, that it should be in that context. And given that they have another site for a child care center, perhaps there's another site that could be used for child care. But I don't understand the value of demolishing a historic property to create an open lot. It just seems like that leaves another broken tooth in our historic district. And, you know, I think the goals and the finances of the Y are not a consideration when it comes to determining whether or not this historic property should be demolished. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have another? Yeah.
The final name that I have on the public comment sheet here is Trouble Mandison.
Hello. Thanks for letting me speak. I am a member of the Y. I actually work for the Y, writing grants with Jane Trosen. So I'm very aware of the statistics of the need for childcare in Franklin County. I don't have children myself, but I know that families are desperately in need of childcare. The church, in the 20 years I've lived in town, I have never seen anything done with it or thought of it as a historic building so much. I didn't even actually know that was a historic district. I just think of all of Main Street as a historic district. I also was one of the artists that did one of the abolitionist murals. So I'm very appreciative of what's happened in this town and what is part of our history. You know, there seems to be some different thoughts about historically, but it doesn't seem like historically it had a lot to do with Greenfield. You know, maybe the facade could be kept. Maybe there could be a plaque. Here stood the site of the, you know, Coldbrook Church. But I just think that it feels like an empty space not being used, not really being appreciated or admired. People, I don't think, are flocking here to come look at the church as a historical structure. Not to demean it, you know, its value, but it feels like it hasn't really been on the floor or in people's minds all of this time. And now that there's a plan for it. It feels like people are saying, oh, maybe we should keep it. So I'm just saying, I feel that the Y really has a great need for it. I think the community has a great need for it. I think that there can be something done where the church itself is memorialized historically if it needs to be, but I just don't see it as some great city treasure that, you know, we're in danger of losing. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Any other folks want to comment? And anybody on the Zoom call, last chance? Nope. Okay. Having no further volunteers to speak, I will, yeah, Mitch. Okay. Last minute. Mitch Anthony.
Should we grab the address and everything?
Sure. Yeah.
My name is Mitch Anthony. I have lived in Greenfield, oh, sorry? Oh. Okay. My name is Mitch Anthony. I've lived in Greenfield since 1976, which does make me a newcomer, I understand. I love Greenfield because it is a community that cares about community. And when I hear an historian referring to a beautiful, architecturally significant building as dead space just because it has not been used in a number of years, I'm somewhat offended. And then to hear in the same paragraph the old library being referred to as dead space, when we all know that a very successful, privately held public bank is renovating that building, and they're not going to hurt its architectural integrity. It will be a modern building. It will serve the needs of the bank, but it will not hurt that end of Main Street. I like to think in the context of yes and. I've raised 3 kids here. I used to be the president of the Greenfield Girls Club. I understand the need for childcare. It's very important. And I can imagine a yes and. I can imagine a beautiful building that is built from an old church that does house a daycare center. What I didn't hear in the presentation from the Y is it will cost $1.5 million to renovate the building. What I didn't hear is what's it going to take it down. There's still money involved. And what I would love to be thinking about is what would it mean for the whole community to rally around saving a building and supporting the Y. Yes and, not either or. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Okay, so one more. All righty.
Yeah, hi. I'm not a resident of Greenfield. I am speaking as the board president of the YMCA, Joe Viadero, and current board president. I just want to just summarize some of the things that Grady said. Our initial decision as a board to accept a donation to purchase the church was part of our long-term strategic plan regarding our ability to sustain ourselves in our current Main Street campus. However, if the Y is unable to demolish the church, this could force us to revisit our original plan and look to other sites that are probably less convenient for the residents of Greenfield, be they in Greenfield or other places in Franklin County. Yes, it is going to cost money to demolish a church, and we do have a quote on that, and it's somewhere in between $50,000 and $100,000. So we are aware of that. Your committee has the authority, per your bylaws, to impose a 6-month demolition delay if they so choose on the site. But as you can see from Grady's presentation, our presentation at the Y, we have gone through the steps in a good faith effort to comply what this delay, if it was imposed on us, would occur. So I think that a further delay would not benefit anyone at this point, in my opinion. But thank you very much for letting us come here and hear this discussion.
You're very welcome. Thank you. With that, I move to close the hearing and convene the meeting of the Greenfield Historic Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So our mandate tonight is to decide whether to consider the Colebrook Church a significant building that needs to be preserved. And let's have discussion on that matter.
Well, I think there's no doubt that, I mean, to me, looking at the ordinance, it says historic and significant. So I think the building is historic and it's significant, both because it's in the district and because of its history. And that is not, in my mind, an opinion as to whether the building should be preserved or not. That is not the issue that we're discussing here. We're talking about whether it meets the language, the strict language of the ordinance. And if it does meet that language, then the ordinance automatically goes into effect. And so I think our decision here at this point is not to decide the long-term fate of the building, but to simply say, does it meet the language of the ordinance? And the ordinance is very carefully laid out. All of that language is very carefully laid out. And I think our role is very carefully laid out as well. So I would say, from my point of view, is that it does meet the language, the strict language of the ordinance. And since it does, I don't feel we have a lot of choice in the matter, frankly, because once that ordinance goes into effect, then the rest of it is, automatic. And that could be seen as being unfortunate, but that's the way the ordinance reads. And so from my point of view, it meets the standard. And that's all we're here to discuss or to decide at this point, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Other comments?
I'd personally be interested in hearing the results of that meeting on the 3rd. I think a demolition delay in any instance or requirements would certainly give them time to decide whether or not they want to do anything. It would give them to decide, would give us more time to decide, more information for everyone in general. So considering that the Bay Area Historical Society is still looking into the building and making their exceptions, based on their tour tomorrow, the 6 months delay would only help that cause. It would only help preserve the building, whatever happens to it. So in that effort, I would support the delay as well.
Yeah, I first want to say I really appreciate everyone coming out and the interest in the community. It's great to see so many people in the community so engaged with history and also with preservation and with the really valuable work that I think the YMCA is doing. So I really appreciate everyone who came and gave comments on both sides of the issues this evening, and also know that I appreciate the work that the Y has done to court different entities who might be interested in using the church. I think good faith effort has been made, so I get that I think that appreciation is first and foremost. the information related to the abolitionist history of the church is interesting. I think, and I read what was sent over by Grady, and Grady shared this evening from Barry, related to this question of whether or not Garrison or others spoke at the church. It is one of these, it seems that information has included in the National Register nomination. So the National Register obviously being the official, generally the final word on the historic status of a building. It is the official national list of places that are historic in the United States. And that information is in the National Register nomination. Now, that said, as someone who's worked on National Register nominations, I know that the National Register nominations vary in quality over the years. The standards in 1989 are not exactly the same as what they were today. So, is it possible that what's in that National Register nomination was taken from this one source in the Recorder article? And we don't know exactly where that came from. What I'm saying here, I guess, is that I trust the National Register nomination because it is an authority, but it's also not foolproof, especially nominations that are that old. That said, again, as I'm looking at the specifics of the ordinance and in what situation we would designate a building as preferably preserved, the history of abolition activity at the church is a feather in the cap, but to me it's not the only reason, and based on the ordinance, I think it's not the only reason that the building would be historic. So I guess it's not a necessary condition for determining whether or not the building is historic. It adds to the argument if it is the case. If not, as I'm looking at the ordinance here, it is telling me that there are 3 different criteria essentially under which a building could be determined to be historically significant and preferably preserved in this case: historical importance, architectural importance, and geographic importance. One subcategory there is the building being identified with a person or group of persons who had some influence on society. So that's the connection to the abolitionist movement. But that's just one piece of the larger puzzle. A building can be historically significant if it has character, interest, or value as part of the development, heritage, or cultural characteristics of the town of Greenfield or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I think the fact that the building was moved here in 1936, again, not obviously directly, it was not in the Quabbin, but it was part of that larger project, is my understanding. That is an important aspect of the development and heritage of the Commonwealth. It is my understanding that even though it was not in a town that was flooded, that it would not have been moved or needed to be moved in the first place were it not for the development of the Quabbin. So I think that is an area of historical importance. Exemplifying the cultural, political, economic, social, or historic heritage of the community is another way that a building can have historic significance according to the ordinance. Being the oldest church building in town, whether or not it started here, is something that to me exemplifies the historic heritage of the community. Architectural importance, one of the categories there is embodying the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type. The National Register nomination and the state historic designation, I'd say, call it out as an excellent example of a Greek revival building, so I do think it meets that criteria. And then within geographic importance, it also notes that a building can be a structure as to its unique location or physical characteristics represents an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood or the community as a whole. I think, again, whether or not the building is active right now, it is a prominent building within a historic district in town, and so it meets that criteria in my mind. I think the hurdle for not imposing the delay and meeting these criteria is if this building would essentially not be detrimental to the historic or architectural heritage or resources of the town, according to the ordinance, to remove. And I think it's difficult for me to say that this building, which is well known in town, is architecturally distinctive and has been in this prominent location for 90 years, and has this connection to the development of the reservoir, that removing it, I can't say in good faith that removing it would not be detrimental to the architectural and historical heritage of the town.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm going to make a couple comments as a member of the commission. I'm an architect, and I've practiced in this area for 40 years. We actually did a historic renovation of the Whately Town Hall. That is a Greek Revival church, or originally it's a Greek Revival building that is on the National Register. And we were able to take a poorly utilized building and make it a performance space and meeting space and history museum area that the town loves. And I think the total cost was $2 million about 5 years ago. Don't hold me to that, but it wasn't any more than new construction would have cost. And what it did was celebrate the history of Whately and just reinvigorate the downtown. And Whately also has some other Greek Revival churches that are very active and well cared for, and they're beautiful buildings. I mean, this does have architectural significance in and of itself. And the other thing that I just wanted to say was, in your presentation from the Y, you talk about the $1.5 million to renovate it, but you didn't talk about what it would cost to build a new building of similar size. And I mean, you can't really do much for, you might get a slightly bigger, more flexible, more a floor plan that's more attuned to what you would like, but it's not going to cost significantly less than the cost that you've said would be a renovation. So, any other comments?
I think I'll work a little bit off of what Tim said earlier. The purpose of the meeting tonight is just to determine whether or not the building has some sort of historic significance. And I think reading in the ordinance, even if it's not to the town of Greenfield itself, to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which this building was originally constructed within the Commonwealth. And I think maybe at a later date we can kind of get into the specifics and the semantics of what actually will happen with the building.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion from a member. Commissioner?
Move that we,
Do you want to turn your mic on?
apologies. I move that we go forward with the designation as an important and historical significant building, which in turn would trigger the ordinance.
I think the language is a preferably preserved historic building.
As amended.
Great. Could I hear a second?
I second that.
Any further discussion? No? Hearing none, do you want to move? Somebody move the motion.
We just need to vote, that's all.
Okay. You moved the motion. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, it's 5-0. Motion's approved. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I do want to say that under the ordinance, you need to protect the building. Do you have an active fire alarms and smoke detectors going?
Well, I have a question really quickly, if I can, please.
Sure.
The ordinance doesn't trigger a 45-day or a 6-month delay. There's actually two options in the ordinance under 241-4. The significance of the building was already established at the December meeting. At this meeting, the purpose I thought.
No, we didn't move that. We didn't do a hearing and then decide whether it was a preferably preserved building or not. So, yes, yes. And today is, it starts the 6 months delay.
There's two options in the procedural portion of the demo delay.
Would you please move to the microphone with your comment? Thank you.
Could you identify yourself, please? We don't know.
I was going to. I'm Tracy Fisher. I'm with the YMCA.
Oh, okay.
And I was in attendance at the last meeting as well, just to make sure I understand procedurally. So under 241.4 of the demo delay, paragraph C, that's the first option for this commission. This commission does not have to determine that there's a 6-month delay. In fact, it says that if it's not detrimental to the historical or architectural heritage or resources of the town, the Greenfield Historical Commission shall notify the inspector of buildings within 7 days, and then we can proceed with demolition. Paragraph D, if you guys determine that the significant building would be detrimental, then you can implement the 6-month delay. What I didn't hear in this motion, what I heard was that it was an automatic trigger. That doesn't appear to be the case. There actually has to be a motion to implement one or the other in the procedural option. And that's what we need a determination on right here. So are we paragraph C, where we can proceed with the demolition, or are we paragraph D? What are you guys voting on to implement at this time so that we understand this a little better? Because it doesn't appear to be an automatic trigger.
My interpretation is we did D very clearly, that we designated the building as a preferably preserved significant building.
But you didn't
And
determine
as
whether it would be
such-
detrimental.
What?
The second piece of that is would be detrimental, that the demolition of it would be detrimental. That wasn't in the motion. So are you
It was
guys as a-
implied.
I would recommend that it be more clearly stated so that we understand that it's not an automatic trigger of a demo delay.
If I may speak to this, the text that I have here is, if the Greenfield Historical Commission determines that the demolition of the significant building would be detrimental to the historical or architectural heritage or resources of the town, such building shall be considered a preferably preserved significant building. So, after, over the course of this public hearing and through our deliberation, we've determined that the demolition of the significant building would be detrimental, and so we just considered it a preferably preserved, and the determination remains in effect for 6 months from the date of decision. So I think what that means is that we have that, since
Yeah,
we
the
have
next
determined,
sentence
we have
applies,
determined
right.
it was a preferably preserved building, so the paragraph D.
So from what
shows that-
I'm reading, it does say you can, if it determines the demolition of the significant building would not be detrimental in paragraph C. Paragraph D, it says you would determine if it would be detrimental. That motion was not considered, so you did say that it was historically significant. It was a significant for preservation. That was, you guys said it is significant.
Preferably preserved
Preferably.
significant building.
However, it was not voted on if you would implement the demolition delay or not. In option C, it determines, you can say that it is historically significant and would not be detrimental to the historical or architectural heritage of town. Or in option D, you can say it is significant and you want to have the 6-month demolition delay. So I think that you should consider what to do with those two options.
I disagree. I think that it says here, under D, if, upon determination by the Greenfield Historical Commission that the significant building, which is the subject of the application for a demolition permit, is preferably preserved significant building, is a preferably preserved significant building, the Greenfield Historical Commission shall, within 7 days, so advise the applicant by registered mail and the inspector of buildings, and no demolition permit may be issued until at least 6 months after the date of designation as preferably preserved significant building. That's what we did. We called it a preferably preserved significant building.
In
And I
paragraph-
wanted to continue and just say that applicant shall, upon notice of said designation, secure the building or site against vandalism, fire, or other destruction, and post a copy of said designation on the building in a place visible from the nearest public way. The applicant shall give reasonable access to the building or site to the Greenfield Historic Commission and to parties interested in preserving it. I don't think we need to re-vote or open the hearing again. The hearing was closed. And
Okay.
we're,
Thank you.
I also just really want to say that this is our first ever demolition delay vote. We don't do it lightly. We wish it were called something else. Wish it were called a preservation ordinance or preservation motivation ordinance, something like that. That it's not, I mean, I'm a past president of the Y. I'm a member. I support what you do. I think Mitch's notion that we work together. 6 months is a very short delay. In Medford, it's 18 months. In Boston, I don't know how long it is, but you know, it's really time for everybody to plan and to hopefully find a solution that works out to the best for everyone. At the end of 6 months, and this is, as I said, it's meant to spur preservation. We will work with you as much as we can. We'll talk it up. We're not trying to stop progress. We're just trying to make sure that all options are considered. If at the end of 6 months, we have the option of of recommending to the city council a further delay, another 6-month delay. That's never been done by this commission either. That would be new territory. I can't say whether we would consider doing it or not. Yes?
Not
No, it
not
goes to us.
automatically, no.
Yeah.
Not auto, we would have to take it there. Well, this is a delay. It's only a delay, and so at the end of 6 months, if we didn't decide to take it any further, then I assume that the demolition would go forward. It's only a delay, and we hope, the whole idea of the ordinance is to allow more time to think, and more time to talk, and more time to try to come to some kind of understanding that makes everybody happy, if that's possible. But at the end of the delay is up, the delay is up. And unless we did something further, which, as Margot said, we've never done. But that isn't to say we couldn't. Would depend on how strongly we feel about it at that time.
I think under E, it says that notwithstanding the preceding section, the inspector of buildings may issue a demolition permit for a preferably preserved significant building at any time after receipt of written advice from Greenfield Historic Commission to the effect that either there's no reasonable likelihood that either the owner or some other group will preserve the building, or that we're satisfied that for at least 6 months you made bona fide and reasonable efforts to locate a purchaser to preserve, rehabilitate, or restore the subject building. Yes, Patty? Yeah. Yes, yeah. Yes?
So at the end of 6 months, the Y could apply for a demolition permit.
Yes, and they need to indicate to us that efforts have been made to preserve the building.
And that would be just a matter of record. Right?
Well, actually, you know,
Further review, in other words, after 6 months, you would have had your 6-month period, and you would have
Actually, I'm not clear myself.
Well, they've
Uh,
already applied for the permit,
Yeah.
so they wouldn't have to apply again. This just delays it.
That's not true, that we weren't able to complete the permit because at the last meeting, we got approval to do the asbestos abatement. So section 10
Oh,
of that demo permit requires us to do certain things like shut-offs, asbestos abatement prior to completing that application.
okay.
At the December meeting, we got approval from the commission to move forward with the asbestos abatement and the shut-offs to complete the demolition permit application.
Okay.
But we still have to move forward with those pieces, complete the application, and get the completed application in.
Oh, thank you.
There was also no floor plans included with the demolition permit, and I think we're going to ask for those subsequent. They don't have to be in detail, but it did call for floor plans, and there weren't any attached.
For the demo permit itself, because I know for the notification to this commission, floor plans were included.
We never got them.
Yeah, that was part of what was dropped off to Eric Frog, the 50-page application for notification. So that
Yeah, I asked Eric for it today, and he said, no, they weren't, it wasn't included, so let's figure it out. Yeah. I'm unclear of exactly how, the clock starts ticking tonight, and I believe, like in 5 months, we want to have you come to a meeting and explain how things are going and what other efforts have been made, and then we'll take it under advisement.
Yeah, and I think the idea, right, that we, that we can all work together, right, to get to, nobody, I don't think anybody wants, well, the building to just come down after 6. Like, we work together is the idea, that this delay provides opportunities. So I guess my point in that is, like, don't be a stranger. Like, we should keep talking to each other during the course of this 6 months, and get to a solution.
And that said, I don't think it's not questionable whether or not the Y has put in a good effort. This has definitely been a good faith effort. You've met with us multiple times. Clearly, you've put in a lot of work. I'm personally really excited to see what happens tomorrow with the Barry Historical Society, because not that it will be the magic bullet, but it might be progress that we all want to see an equitable solution.
And it would be fitting for a building that had been moved once to have it move again. Okay, thanks, everybody. I'll call the meeting to a close. Could I hear a motion to close the meeting?
I make that motion.
All in favor? Aye.